we got a call on some Klipsch heresies. We still see heresies quite often. I'm not a Klipsch historian, so I'm not going to try to explain their serial number or their model types, but make note, this is a Klipsch heresy 5. The heresy HBR. Okay, we'll go with that. Anyway, it's typical that when we get a call, it's like, what's wrong with your speakers? Well, I don't know. They just don't sound right. So, of course, the first thing we do is check with our meter. And we've got one of them that's 7.5 ohms approximately. And that's right, or close. And we check the other one, and we're bouncing around the other one from, you can see, 20 million ohms to open. All right, so obviously a problem here. So we check it out and notice that this is the type E2 crossover. We don't have the paper and oil caps here, so we're not going to talk about the crossover, but that's another subject. I think we might have another video about paper and oil caps. Anyway, we have to disconnect the woofer from the network. We cut the leads here because we figured we're going to have to pull it out. We could have taken it loose up here at the network the way these are put together. But then we check our woofer out of the circuit on the meter, and now we're showing open. Okay, it bounced around from open to, millions of ohms. So we've got the woofer out, and we'll take it over here to the bench right quick. Sorry about working on the floor, but we got a full house right now. So anyway, we go back and we get it on the bench, and I suspect what we're dealing with is lead wires. And then when I look at the lead wires, just looking at them, you say, yeah, it's most likely lead wires. And it's moving freely in the gap, so it's probably not a burnt voice coil. Anyway, we go back to our bench and we put the meter on again, and we're still showing open. And then I start to manipulate the lead wires around a little bit, and look at our meter now. 76 ohms, and there we go. 7 ohms. Okay, so our voice coil is good, and what that means is these lead wires are bad, and I'm going to show you how to put on a set of lead wires. Okay, so we've concluded that we have bad lead wires and the voice coil is good, and we're going to show you how to replace these lead wires. First thing we had to do is get this dust cap off here. I'm going to use my X-Acto knife to go around here, and I'm going to cut this dust cap off of here, and just like that, boom, magically it's off. Alright, so we can see the lead wires down here. See where the voice coil wires come up and attach to the lead wires. There's the solder joint there. There's the solder joint there. That's what we're looking at on the back side, that joint right there. I don't know if you can see that, but it doesn't much matter to look in the back side anyway. You can't really see anything there. So, anyway, so here's where they are. Here's the solder joints here, and we've got to get this voice coil wire exposed. So you got 3 choices basically. I don't use solvents. I rarely ever use solvents. They cause all kinds of problems. Not to mention breathing in all that toxic stuff all the time. So if you're not going to use solvents, then you can see that if you can scrape this off like this, some type of scraper, and you have to break that bond, that glue joint, and you have to get that wire clean. And trying to do it with any kind of knife, it's going to take forever, and there's a good chance you're going to damage the voice coil wire doing it. So that leaves us with the third option, which is our soldering iron. And the soldering iron, obviously we're going to break this joint, but we can also run the iron down this wire like this. And we can use a soldering iron tip here to melt that wire away, where we can get that voice coil wire up without damaging it. And the solder joint, it's right there, and you can see it when you get through the glue and you hit the solder joint. You see, now what I'm going to do is reach in here with a pair of pliers underneath. I'm going to get a hold of it. All right, now I've got a hold of it here, and then I'm going to get my iron on here and pull it out. See? Okay, now there's no rivet. It's just a hole through the paper. You don't want to make that hole any bigger than you have to. So you want to be careful with how much heat you put there and the pressure you apply. Okay, so we've got this voice coil lead up. We've used our iron to basically break that glue bond and get the excessive glue off of it. So we've got the one wire completely exposed. We'll reach in here and get a hold of this one, and same thing, we'll break the solder joint. Get a little tug here on the back side. Alright, lead wire's loose. So, and I'm going to take the dust cap I cut off there, and I'm going to lay it in there just right, maybe keep something from getting down in the gap. Alright, so I just go along the wire as I see it down to where I need to get it loose, and then I'll take my iron and I'll get up underneath it. I don't want to burn through that paper cone. There it is. See it lift up? See how I've melted through the glue, and I've used my iron to lift it up. And I know the soldering people out there are going to be screaming bloody murder. Oh my God, look what you're doing to your soldering iron. I've only done this a half a million times, so I think I can figure out how to clean that tip. So we get both of them up, and the second part of it is we'll get it in here and make sure if there's any residue of the glue left on there. We'll take that off with our knife gently, because we don't want to damage the wire. And we don't burn the crap out of ourselves here, getting in a hurry, but alright, so we get a good clean wire that we can wrap around our new lead. Before we do that, now we've got our voice coil exposed, so we'll go back to our meter and we'll make sure we've got a good voice coil before we go to all this trouble. Get on both our voice coil leads, and get it bouncing around because there's still a little bit of glue residue on there that we've got to get out of the way. There's our voice coil. It's bouncing around because I'm not holding perfectly still, but it shows me our voice coil is somewhere around 7 ohms, so I know the voice coil is good, and it's moving freely in the gap. There's no sign in here of any thermal damage. It doesn't look like it's ever been overheated. This glue joint is still good. The voice coil and the cone is intact and is where it needs to be. So we're going to put new lead wire on it. Obviously we've got the lead wires loose on the voice coil. Now we want to get them loose on this end. And we'll break that, glue that solder joint right there. And you can use your braid or whatever you want to use. I'll use this little solder sucker here. And I'll get right in there. Alright, so I've got that hole clear, and this is the lead wire I'm going to use, and we want to make sure that it's not too big to go through that hole. Alright, so we're good there. Alright, now this, in case anybody wonders, we take our little micrometer here, and you can see we've got about 0.05. Alright, so 0.05, it's 400 watts or so, 600 watts, somewhere in that range. Depends on, obviously how long it is. So what we're going to do is push it up against where it's going to go up against the cone. Alright, and then a little bit more. Make sure we don't short ourselves, but it's about right there that we're going to cut it, and then we're going to need 2. So we'll just cut that. Alright. So now we've got our lead wire, and we're ready to apply it, and what we're going to do is come back in here where we've cleaned the voice coil wire good. And what we're going to do is wrap it around there best we can. Alright, if we can get 2 or 3 wraps, the more wraps we get on there, the better off we are. But we'll wrap it around a couple of times. There we go. Get it moving there. Alright, where we got it wrapped around there a couple of times. And then we'll come in with our solder. And we'll solder the voice coil to the lead wire. Let me get that up here. I'm clean that off a little bit better, and then we'll see. We've got a little knot at the end. There it goes. All right, clear that off. Can't tell you how many times I've burnt the heck out of myself grabbing hot metal. But I know you can't see with my hands down in here, but what I'm trying to do is get a twist on that wire, and then I can roll the whole thing around a couple of times. There we go. I get a good twist on that wire. And get some solder here, and then we're going to solder that. Okay. Alright, now the voice coil soldered to the lead. Obviously we'll repeat that over here. And then we'll put the new lead wire through the original hole. We might have to enlarge that just a little bit. And we'll put that lead wire right through there. And we'll reach in underneath here, get a hold of it. Pull it out there where we need it, and then we'll set it down here, and what we want to do is get it laid down in here. You see it's soldered to the voice coil, so that's not going anywhere. So what we want to do is get it laid down in there to where when we overlay it with the glue, it'll set down, and the voice coil wire itself and the lead wire will all be supported like it was. And then of course we're going to come through the terminal, and we're going to put our lead wire through that hole there. I'll show you that in just a second. So we've got both of our new lead wires soldered onto the voice coil, and we've got them all laid down to where when we overcoat this, when we're finished, we'll come in like Clips did in the first place, we'll overcoat this here. We'll glue this all down really good. But first we're going to complete and test with the meter to make sure it's all good, and then we'll actually run the sine wave generator, and we'll make sure it's running right before we do this final step of gluing this down. And then of course after that we won't reuse this dust cap, but we'll put a new set of dust caps on them. But to finish the lead wires, okay, you can see I've got one pulled through. All right, and I'm going to show you that we come in here with our tool. You could use your fingers, I guess, but you got to get in here just right. And you have to be, there it goes. Alright, so now we have them both pulled through. Now what you need to do is make sure that you've got the lead wire where you want it to be. You want to have some slack for the travel, but you want it to curve and not come in contact with the spider or the cone, and have enough slack in it for travel. And that's about right. That's a little bit, not quite as much slack as the first one, but the first one failed, didn't it? So, alright, so now we just come back in with our iron. And you'll see it run when it's ready. We got a good solder joint all the way around. Put a little bit more slack in that one before we nail it down. That's about right. Obviously we had to clean the terminal so we can solder it back into the network. And if I have to show you that, you probably shouldn't be trying to do this stuff yourself anyway. But you can see we had to clear out the old solder joint and make it ready to put the new wire on. So now before I trim these, oh, we're still a little bit hot there. Alright, now before I trim these, and before I glue down the voice coil, we're going to do one more check and make sure that we've actually succeeded in this job. Should be around 7.2, 7.5. That's a little low. Yeah, it'll settle in about 7. Yeah, 6.9. So the new lead wires are successfully installed. I'll trim them here flush. You can put a little dab of silicone on here if you want to. You don't have to, it's not necessary. And then I'll come back in here over the top with like a glue like this, black glue, and I'll set that down, and I'll cover those completely the same way that it was before with the larger. See, this is probably twice as thick as the lead wire that was on them, and this is a good high grade of silver nickel lead wire. So that's basically how we do it, and we put the glue on and make sure some glue goes down in that hole there. And you can come onto the back side if you want to and put a little bit of glue on the back side, or a little whatever you want to use there, or silicone or whatever. But we get that glued down. When that dries, we'll test it on the generator and make sure it runs good, and then we'll put a new dust cap on it. And that's how we put lead wires, and we saved ourselves the necessity of doing a complete recone on this speaker.